Welcome to our employment law video series. My name's Christopher Neufeld of Neufeld Legal. And in this particular video, we're going to be discussing that when you've been fired, it's the time to start looking diligently at your employer's payment practices as they relate to yourself. Now, considering all aspects, whether you've been fired, terminated, laid off permanently, resigned, or otherwise find yourself out of your job, this is a time when you can go and with professional counsel start assessing whether the payment practices involving your employer, who is now your former employer, were in fact accurate, and if you are entitled to something more. Because oftentimes, all too often, employers have sought to underpay their employees. Now, naturally, when you're employed by the employer, nobody's going to start nitpicking around and trying to identify where there's underpayments and where there's obligations to have paid yourself more. That doesn't come about. You're not going to have a job that pays you $60,000, $80,000 a year, maybe even more, and start assessing, first of all, spending the money for it to engage professionals like ourselves to start assessing what the payment arrangements are, what the potential implications are, only to find that maybe you should be paid an extra $500,000, $2,000 per year. Because everybody knows that as soon as you start making a fuss when you're working for a particular employer, like it or not, you're going to be put on the bad list. And the employer is not going to be fond of the fact that you're looking for a couple $100, a couple $1,000 more when they have been paying you a substantial amount of money. It just creates the image that you're a problematic employee. And as such, very few people really go and look to pursue, much less litigate, their employers when they're currently employed in a job that's paying them quite well. So when is the time to do it? Well, the only real time to do it is when you've been fired, let go, or otherwise departed your present employment. Or you've been put in a position where you've constructively been dismissed, or you're transferring to another company through an acquisition or otherwise, and you're not going to be with that particular employer anymore. So in those circumstances, you then have the opportunity to start to look and say, I need to go and assess whether or not I've been properly paid, because the repercussions are slightly different. The repercussions are you can act upon it, but you don't necessarily need to act upon it. And when you do act upon it, yes, you need to protect yourself in the sense that you don't want to be inaccurate, go after them and find out that you're wrong and you have to pay for their legal fees because you were wrong, you disparaged them, you slandered them, or whatever garbage they might throw out against yourself. But the one factor that's different is that they can't take away your job at that point because you're already out of a job. So this is now the appropriate time in many respects to start looking into quickly and immediately, and as I say, with appropriate professional counsel who understands what needs to be looked into, whether your wages, whether your pay throughout the process and in your termination has been accurate. Because there's another underlying principle that goes into this. And that is the fact that employers are out there and they pay their people, but they don't want to pay them over and above what they believe is due. And if they can get away with paying you less, and they're oblivious to paying you less, they'll proceed with that. Like at the end of the day, most employers, they get into their position because they're aggressive, profit-oriented individuals. But their key profit is not how profitable their employees will be and how wealthy their employees will be. At the end of the day, unfortunately, and you see this especially in the larger companies, which you have to focus on, is that they're focused on how profitable they can make the company, because in turn, the more profitable the company is, the more they get in their pay package, in their bonuses, in their stock options, in their retirement packages, in their investments, all that stuff. And also their perception is that much greater. So their focus is on making as much profit as possible. So they're not trying to give away all the profits to their employees. They're going to pay them what they, quote unquote, deserve. And what they deserve is often far less than what they would want. Naturally, every employee would want to get paid more than what they deserve, but they're happy to have the job and they're not going to fight about the job while they're working at the job. So that's a situation you find yourself in. But when you find yourself in that situation, the fact of the matter is there is the possibility that you are effectively being underpaid. And there are different rationales under which you can be underpaid. We won't go into each of them because every circumstance is different. And some may be fully paying you. But there are circumstances, there are more often than not circumstances which reflect the fact that employees have been underpaid. And now that you've been terminated, fired, let go from your job, departed, or otherwise, it is a time to see, is this some avenue that I want to pursue? Especially when you look back and you say, this was inappropriate how I was let go. It wasn't on my terms. I don't feel I've been underpaid. But even if you feel like you got a half decent package, you really should look into it. And why did I say it? Especially when you've been there for a long period of time. The fact of the matter is that there may well be money that's properly owing to yourself. And it's not going to hurt these big companies, especially where the money is due to you. The fact of the matter remains, that money may well have been owing and due to yourself. And in the big scheme of things for the company, it's not necessarily the biggest thing. But for you, if you were properly due to be paid an extra $20, $30, $50, even $100,000 from your employment, why are you leaving it on the table and walking away? You're leaving it so your multi-million-dollar CEO of your big company can get a fifth car, can buy a seventh vacation home? Are you serious? This is money that is properly yours oftentimes, but instead of you addressing it or others addressing it, the profiteer CEO continues to operate the business and technically is underpaying people in the business and not being held to account, because everybody who's working there is comfortable with having their job and they don't want to lose their job. And if anything, they're going to look to get a raise. But that doesn't mean just because they get a raise later on, money that is owed to them is not due to them. So that is a scenario that people can find themselves in. And it's a scenario where you have to take action if you feel comfortable with taking that action, naturally. But what we're talking about is that this is money that may well be owing to yourself, money that may be deserving to yourself. So if it is, you should be willing to pursue it. At least take a look at it. Speak to appropriate professional counsel, including legal counsel, and attempt to discern whether or not that money is properly due and owing to yourself. If there is something there, if there's nothing there, there's nothing much that can be done. But if there is something there, then you got to weigh the positives and negatives, and there are always negatives associated with this. But In many respects, the negatives are not as negative as one might initially think. But then you develop a game plan approach, you understand how things will move forward and the like, and you ascertain what will transpire. You properly position yourself with your professional legal counsel so you move forward and you address this correctly and you insulate yourself legally and financially, and then you move forward. And that's what we want to do with people who see this. We want to help them make sure that now that they've gone from the job, whether they're departed of their own free will or they've been terminated, fired, laid off permanently or otherwise, that their pay was all properly paid out to them. Were they fully paid out? And if they weren't fully paid out, we have to understand why they weren't fully paid out. And if it's a matter of them, for whatever reason, being undercut at the employer's side, they should address it as such. So if you're looking to discern whether or not you've been properly paid through the course of your employment and on your termination, your exit, please do not hesitate to contact us. We'll let you know what our typical review process is and tell you how we go about approaching it. At the same time, we do recommend you, if you feel appropriate, go speak with other lawyers, speak with other financial professionals and ask them their thoughts on how to approach this and make a smart and wise decision as to how you might look to approach the situation. If there is the possibility that you have been underpaid or improperly been denied payments, that is oftentimes money that you are entitled to. And if it's money that you're entitled to, you should be receiving that money. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in the capitalist society that we live in, where unfortunately a lot of the leadership, ownership in these very large companies that you've been working for are in it for themselves. They don't care about the fact that you are deserving of more money. It's just part of the process. And they realize that many people don't look into this. And as such, they're leaving lots of money on the table. And to them, it's very little. To you, it can be significant. So take a look into this if you feel it's appropriate, and we'll work with you in confidence and move this forward. Thank you very much.